Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a Criminally Basic podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Hannah.
And oh boy, friends, things are happening in the true crime community today. So, disclaimer, this episode is going up a day later than I was anticipating. We usually record Sunday or Monday, and then episodes go up Tuesday. We are recording this on April 13th, 2021, which is a Tuesday. So, this is most likely going to be going up April 14th, tomorrow, depending on how quickly I can get this edited.
Yeah. Still, though, we're going to try. This is very last minute for our usual episodes, but a lot has happened in one day.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I was sitting at work, just doing my thing, and I check my phone and I see that I have multiple texts from Hannah freaking out about an update on the Kristin Smart case.
And Megan knows that when I text like 10 times in a row, something serious has happened.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So Kristin was a college freshman back in 1996, and she just like mysteriously went missing after attending a party. And I had kind of like passingly heard about this case, I think a few
I as
years
well.
ago, right? It's not one that really stuck out in my mind as one of those that like I think about often,
Yeah,
but I
I like
remember maybe watching a documentary or hearing something about it a little while ago.
there's a lot of cases that girls go missing after parties, which is sad and horrible, but it unfortunately happens far too much.
Right. I think this is a great place to say it shouldn't happen at all. The fact that, this is a case that doesn't really stick out in our memories, I think is really, really sad and horrifying.
Absolutely.
But after the many updates that Hannah inundated me with throughout the day, I went back and I looked at it and I decided to cover it this week. So, like I said, we're recording this on April 13th, and this case definitely is not over. We'll do our best to give periodic updates when big things happen in the case.
But this was too big of an update not to cover.
Yeah, seriously. So, with that being said, let's get into the disappearance of Kristin Smart. Kristin was born on February 20th, 1977, in Augsburg, Germany. Shortly after she was born, her family, which included her mom, dad, brother, and sister, all moved from Germany to Stockton, California. She and her family would remain in California, and when the time came for her to go to college, she chose California Polytechnic State University, also known as Cal Poly, and she majored in architecture. She seemed to live a pretty normal college life. She lived on campus, she had a roommate, she went to parties. I don't believe she was involved romantically with anyone. None of my sources mentioned like a partner, but from what I can tell, there wasn't anything about her freshman year that stuck out as anything but normal. May 24th, 1996 was a Friday, and that led into Memorial Day weekend. Kristin was getting ready to finish off her freshman year, and as most college students are, I'm sure she was excited for the holiday weekend and the day that she would have off that coming Monday on Memorial Day. That evening, according to an LA Times article written by Richard Winton, she planned on heading to an off campus party at an unofficial fraternity house. So, just a house with a bunch of frat guys, but, not like officially involved with the fraternity. Kristin left her dorm with a few friends and hitched a ride to the party, but since her friends weren't really interested in going, they dropped her off and just headed on their own way.
That's something you should never do. Always have a buddy when you go to a party.
Absolutely. And I don't know if she like knew people at this party. I'm sure
Mhm.
she did at
Oh,
least like
I'm sure she
passingly
did.
know some people. She didn't go with anybody and she wasn't, as far as I know, planning on leaving with anybody.
But don't leave your friends and roommates alone at a party, no matter what.
Right. From what I can tell, the party was your stereotypical college party with underage drinking that went until about 2 a.m. That is when Tim Davis, who's one of the guys who organized the party, found Kristin passed out on the next door neighbor's lawn.
Oh,
So,
poor thing.
very stereotypical college party. Being at least a decent person, he tried to, get her up, but he could clearly see that she was in no shape to walk back to her dorm by herself. According to her page on the Charlie Project's website, it was clear that she was under the influence of either alcohol or drugs, and she was having trouble walking. Tim and another student, Cheryl Anderson, started walking her home when someone else volunteered too, Paul Flores, who is a fellow Cal Poly student majoring in food science. The Charlie Project reports that Paul had met Kristin earlier that evening at the party, but there aren't really any specific eyewitnesses that put the two of them talking for long periods of time, so it was likely just random interactions.
Yeah.
At this point, it's 2 a.m. on May 25th, and Tim and Cheryl both did eventually leave Paul to walk Kristin home. They walked her part of the way, Tim left first, and then when Paul said that he would, walk her the rest of the way because her dorm was the closest to his, Cheryl left the two as well. That was the last time anybody ever saw Kristin Smart alive. The first person to report Kristin missing to campus police is disputed in a few of my sources, but according to the Charlie Project, which I really trust, her roommate was the first one to report her missing later on May 25th, so the same day that she went missing, when she failed to return from the party. The roommate first went to campus police, who didn't take the report.
Oh, of course.
Their reasoning was that it was Memorial Day weekend, and a lot of students went on unannounced trips or vacations without telling anybody, and without any way to contact Kristin, there wasn't anything that they could do. So Kristin's roommate, knew that something was wrong. All of Kristin's belongings were still in their dorm, her toiletries, her clothes, even her ID. She hadn't taken anything to this party, so literally everything she had was still in her dorm, other than the clothes that she'd worn. And keep in mind, this is 1996, so it's not like she has a cell phone. It's not like they can ping her location. It's not like she can text or call.
Yeah, but you're not going to go anywhere like important or leave your dorm room without your ID. Like if you're going back home, you're going to have your ID with you.
Exactly. Like she may not have felt the need to take it to the party, but she's not going to go on an unannounced vacation without her ID.
Or her clothes or toiletries.
Exactly. It's not until May 28th when an official report is finally filed with the San Luis Obispo Police Department, not campus police. The police have since admitted that this clear oversight hampered the investigation, and it would actually eventually lead to the Kristin Smart Campus Safety Act, which requires campus police and local police departments to have clear communications and responsibilities when a violent act happens to a student. So basically, it's deciding who does what when something is reported. Once police started actually investigating, there was one person that they honed in on pretty immediately, and that's Paul Flores, the guy who supposedly walked her home. Paul, according to the Charlie Project, was seen the next day with a black eye, and he couldn't give a concrete reason as to why he had it. However, according to an article by Matt Fountain, he would end up pleading the fifth and keeping his mouth shut. Shortly after Kristin went missing, Paul would drop out of school. He was about to fail out of college anyway, but the timing of it was incredibly suspicious.
Just a little suspicious.
He refused to tell police anything in his multiple interviews. He simply stated that he left her outside of his own dorm to let her walk the rest of the way by herself. So from this party, he says that they left, his dorm was their first stop, and then she went the rest of the way back to hers. Over the years, there were a few developments, but none of them really amounted to much. For example, police would search with cadaver dogs around campus multiple times, but the results didn't lead to anything really conclusive. Kristin's family had her legally declared dead in 2002 after years of no breakthroughs in the case. There was actually quite a bit of drama surrounding Kristin's case, including counter lawsuits between Kristin's family and Paul's family, and there's this guy who published Paul's address repeatedly. It was a big mess.
No matter how hated the person is, you can't be posting people's addresses because that is considered doxing.
And it does nothing. It does nothing to help with the case. It's like, I always compare it to comparing people's photos with like police sketches and like doing side by sides and saying, oh, like maybe this is the person. when you have no concrete evidence other than their nose looks kind of similar or
Yeah.
something like that. Paul would end up being charged with drunk driving multiple times since Kristin's appearance, and to my knowledge, he never went back to school. One of the most interesting theories in this case is actually that Scott Peterson was involved.
What, is Scott Peterson now the Ted Bundy? Blame it all on Scott?
So both Scott and his wife Lacey went to Cal Poly. They were actually seniors at the school when Kristin disappeared, and considering, what Scott did to his wife, they thought, oh, maybe this was a crime leading up to the disappearance and murder of Lacey. But eventually, police investigated and there were no ties, nothing to link him to Kristin's disappearance. So I think it's just people grasping at straws. I mean, at that point, it had been years since there was anything, and especially because the Peterson case happened in 2002, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so she disappeared Christmas Eve of 2002. And, when all of this was going on, 2003, they were really just kind of looking for anything to pin him to because that case was really big in the news. And he just so happened to go to the same school as this girl who went missing, and he was a senior and she was a freshman. Maybe they were at the same party. No, there's no connection. So all of that brings us to today, April 13th. And Hannah, I'm actually going to hand it over to you for a minute so that you can kind of walk us through how you found out about this update and the complete roller coaster you brought both of us on throughout the day.
Okay, first off, we're going to walk you back to sometime in March. I don't remember when. There's this TikToker named OK Cammy who lives in the same area as Ruben Flores, who is the father of Paul. She ended up going and recording the initial search that kind of brought all of this back into the forefront. What she saw was nothing. They just kind of searched. Nothing really happened that we knew of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this morning I go to get on TikTok, as I usually do. What's new? And I saw she was live. And I went to click and I'm like, oh, what is this? She says, Paul and Ruben Flores has been arrested. So that's when I decide to live tweet everything and text Megan.
Yeah, so I get a text at 12:21. And the first thing Hannah says is, please watch this now, with 2 exclamation points. And I didn't end up actually seeing it until about 40 minutes later. So sorry, I didn't text you back right then.
I still love you.
But I get a text and it says, please watch this now. They arrested 2 people in the disappearance of Kristin Smart.
And then it's me saying they're digging up Ruben Florence's backyard as we speak. They even have the forensics team there, which you can see there's a tent. It says sheriff's coroner, blah, blah, blah. So you know something's happening. So a little bit later, I was continuing watching the stream, and Cammy had decided to walk up a little bit to an area where she could kind of see into the backyard of the Florence residence. And some man who was beside her was looking on, I don't know what it's exactly called, but we have one here called a jail tracker. It basically lists inmates, what they're charged with, what their bond amount is, stuff like that. Well, the man says they've charged Ruben Flores with accessory after the fact, and his bond is $250,000.
Right. So at that point, I finally respond, and I'm finally starting to look into this when I get a minute. And I ended up looking into it. And not only did they charge Ruben Flores with accessory and a $250,000 bond, they charged Paul Flores for murder.
Yes.
With
no bond.
Hannah, I'm looking back through our texts right now. And at one point you said they're digging up his garage, which is just crazy.
So I was getting a haircut watching the SLO sheriff's press conference, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what happened during that. and what new information we learned. First, a lot of this started back in 2019. They were interviewing witnesses they hadn't originally interviewed before. They actually admitted a lot of the new information came to light because of the Your Own Backyard podcast, and they actually thanked Chris and his efforts for bringing the new evidence and information to light. With this new evidence and information, they were able to get a court order to monitor Paul's cell phone and text messages. They then ended up serving the warrants in February 2020 to Paul's house, Ruben's house, his mother Susan's house, and his sister's house. Well, then that April of 2020, they researched Paul's house again. Evidence from that was recovered, which led us to our search warrant that was issued for March of this year. That which brings you to this morning, where Paul and Ruben were arrested simultaneously at 7:30 Pacific time this morning.
What surprises me about this is that they arrested both Paul and his father. Because one of the theories that I came across, not super commonly, but was that there was potentially another person involved. Because how do you kill someone and, hide the body so well that it's not found without having somebody else there to help you?
Well, police confirmed they believe that Ruben actually did hide her body or help him conceal. So police did confirm that in the press conference today when questions are being asked. They obviously didn't do too good of a job of hiding evidence because they found a bunch almost 25 years later.
I think that kind of takes us into a conversation that actually we were having before we hit record, which was what we think changed. Because we know that police don't just go and arrest someone and charge them with murder without having a good reason to do so. Or hopefully they don't do that.
Yeah. So, okay, my biggest suspicion is if it wasn't for the podcast bringing new people up that they hadn't even interviewed or talked to, I don't think we would be here today.
Definitely not.
I just don't think they had enough evidence without them to look for it. The police said when they searched all of the houses, 2 of the houses had evidence relating to Kristin. I think getting to it was the issue. I think there was enough evidence there. It's just getting a reason to search.
For me, in my opinion, I think that the big thing that changed was having DNA evidence.
Absolutely.
Finally, I am looking at an article right now from CNN. It's written by Paul Verkeman, and it mentions that, quote, authorities have not found Smart's body, but they have come across forensic physical evidence that they, quote, believe is linked to Kristin, end quote. Which, by forensic physical evidence, I think means that they had something that they couldn't test back in 1996, or back a few years ago, even when forensic evidence was not as advanced as it is today, especially with DNA.
I do want to say, though, real quick, they have not found her body yet. Her body is not found yet, but they are suspecting they are close to finding it.
So according to the Charlie Project, which I didn't even mention this earlier, they offered Paul a plea deal where he would plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter if he just revealed where Kristin's body was. And that would get him a 6-year prison term. But at the time that they offered it to him, he refused. Paul is 44 at this point. Ruben, his father, is 80. So they're both going to be in prison probably for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of the updates on the Kristin Smart case thus far. I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm really happy that her family can get some justice and hopefully get some closure as to where her body is, and that they can finally bring her home and lay her to rest.
The police in the press conference did say they have talked to Kristin's family. They said they are feeling a little bit of relief, but also they want to know where she is.
Thank you all for listening to A Criminally Basic Podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check us out at A Criminally Basic Podcast on Instagram, YouTube, and live tweets on Twitter.
Check out our sources as well as photos on our website, www.acriminallybasicpodcast.podbean.com.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.